Hi, I'm Don Frazier, and now we're going to hit the next chapter in this unfolding story about the American Civil War in Louisiana and Texas. With New Orleans secure in Union hands, the next move was let's go upriver, take Baton Rouge, and then leapfrog on up to Vicksburg. Then we will have opened the Mississippi River. The anaconda will, if you believe it, be complete, and all of a sudden the Confederacy will slowly be constricted in the coils of this great blockade. The Confederacy will be done. Problem is, the Confederates were not going along with this script. So Farragut leaves on May 9th, leaves out of New Orleans, takes his ships up to Vicksburg, and there demands the surrender of the city. A lieutenant colonel of the Mississippi State Troops, a gentleman by the name of Autry, says, Mississippians do not even know how to surrender, and we don't plan on learning now. So this defiant gesture convinces Farragut, fine, then I'll just blow the top off your town. And he begins to shell Vicksburg, and this really begins the first of the campaigns to reduce Vicksburg. After 10 days of shelling, the Confederates are still there, and Farragut's in short supply of ammunition, needs more supplies, breaks off contact, and he falls back towards New Orleans. He pulls in at Baton Rouge to get some supplies. As he's putting ashore a party, they've put their boats in the water and they're rowing towards the wharves. Someone from Baton Rouge decides to take a couple of shots at them. So now Farragut's going, all right, these people don't know when they're whipped. So let's toss a couple of rounds into Baton Rouge and convince them that we mean business. And he does. And pandemonium ensues, but he gets his point across. Once back in New Orleans, he says, all right, we need to get the infantry up there as fast as we can. Butler says, fine, have General Williams take his brigade and occupy Baton Rouge. So he does. May 29th, Baton Rouge is officially occupied by federal forces. You know, the Navy can't exactly occupy it, but the infantry can, and they'll do a nice job of it. Well, then the next step is maybe we can make another run at Vicksburg. So about June 6th, he orders one of his subordinates, David Dixon Porter, to take the mortar flotilla, the flotilla that was designed to bombard Forts Jackson and St. Philip. Now that they're unemployed, send them up there to bombard Vicksburg. So Porter takes them up, picks up Williams en route, and they're going to go up there and essentially conduct a siege of Vicksburg. Williams knows that he can't carry the position by frontal assault. He just doesn't have enough troops, but perhaps they can dig a canal across DeSoto Point, re-channel the Mississippi River, and essentially bypass Vicksburg, and then you won't even have to attack it, take it, besiege it, or anything else. So that's the Union plan. As this force is moving upstream, one of the guys aboard boat is a Marine private, Henry O. Gustley of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He's serving aboard the Westfield, which is a converted New York Harbor ferry boat. This was his first look at the South, first look at Louisiana, and he was absolutely blown away by what he saw along the banks of the Mississippi. Said the majority of the towns are beautifully situated on bends of the river. He's writing all this in his diary. There is a picturesqueness about them that leads a passerby to suppose that they are pleasant places to live in, and the trees which line the streets add much to their beauty and unquestionably to their comfort. They're shady towns. Well, between these towns, he couldn't believe the plantations. They were just opulent, just one after another, in what seemed to be just an unbroken chain of villages. He said, from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, they seemed like one continued city. Wow. The thriving lands and the beautiful levees marked it as one of the most desirable places for one to lead a happy life. Gustley was ready to go. He was ready to emigrate right then. But this trip also provided the Marine with his first glimpse of slavery. Being from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, pretty good chance he had never encountered a slave, probably never encountered a single black person. He said in his diary, "The much talked about hardships of the Southern slave have been to us proven a chimera by this trip up the great Mississippi through the hotbed of slavery. We have noticed them, the slaves, at evening sporting around their neat cabins, their rude singing proclaiming them happy. Their condition, as compared with the free Negro of the North, is a paradise." What Gusley was seeing were massive sugar operations that were essentially self-contained factories. The village where the slaves lived was really that. It was a village. It was the size of some New England villages. Then there was the big house where the owner or his designees lived. There was also outbuildings where various industries were conducted, a cooperage perhaps to make barrels that would then be filled with sugar for shipment. There was a blacksmith shop, probably a wheelwright and wagon yard, and on all of them there was the sugar house, where sugar cane was pressed and its juices boiled into sugar. So each one of these is like a factory settlement, and each one of them required a huge amount of capital in order to build. Sugar plantation takes a lot more investment than a cotton plantation. But that said, sugar in the 1850s and 60s, or beginning of the 1860s, was essentially like oil in its value. Everybody wanted sugar, and sugar, as we now know in the modern age, can be somewhat addictive. And so they were increasing the American appetite for sugar, and that appetite was insatiable. These people were getting rich, but it took rich people getting into the sugar business in order to make themselves even richer. A bunch of them had already made their first fortune elsewhere. One fellow by the name of Hewitt, which ran the Crescent Plantation near Donaldsonville, had already made a fortune in salt, and had taken that money to invest in sugar. So that's what Gusley is seeing. Well, this attempt to reduce Vicksburg runs from June 26th to June 28th in a long naval bombardment. That doesn't work. Vicksburg doesn't fall despite all these great mortar boats. So from June 28th to about July 24th, you essentially have a continuous bombardment while General Williams and his guys are digging a canal across DeSoto Point. The Federals are surprised mid-July, July 15th, when CSS Arkansas, a ironclad that had been built up the Yazoo River, comes sallying out the Yazoo River and cuts its way through a Union fleet that had come down from Memphis. Cut its way through, finally parked in front of the guns of Vicksburg to where the Federals really couldn't get at it. Now they tried on July 22nd. The Federals attempted to take out CSS Arkansas, but it fails. And the only thing that really happens is a Union ironclad from the upstream flotilla, USS Essex, floats by Vicksburg after failing to destroy CSS Arkansas, and now finds itself having to attach itself to Farragut's fleet below Vicksburg. Finally, Williams and his troops give up. They say, you know what, we're just getting malaria, we're dying of heat stroke, the river's not cooperating, we're leaving. They fall back to Baton Rouge. Well, now we're kind of at a sticking point. The Federals don't know what their next move is going to be, and the Confederates are trying to figure out how to respond. One thing's for sure, though. As the Federals are falling back, as they're going up and falling back, they see evidence of panic throughout Louisiana on either bank of the river. Producers are throwing cotton and sugar into the Mississippi, burning their crops, burning the bales of cotton, caving in the sugar and wetting it with river water. They're destroying their produce. And that is actually by Confederate law. You can't let this stuff fall into Union hands. Again, the Confederates are banking on creating a cotton famine for sure, but maybe even a sugar shortage, if they can, while the Union troops are passing through. While all of this is going on, General Benjamin F. Butler has really shown the nature of Union occupation to the people of New Orleans. The old saying was, set a thief to catch a thief. Well, this was perhaps employ the devil to punish the devil. At least that's what observers said. One of the things that he did that just outraged people was known as General Order Number 28. And this just kind of gives you a flavor of the Union occupation of New Orleans. Southern women know how to insult a fella without being just totally overt about doing it. And this is an age-old skill that Southern women have developed. And in New Orleans, the way it played out is the women of New Orleans would be walking down the street, see federal officers coming their direction, and they would humph and switch over to the other side of the road. When a Union officer would address the women, "Good day, ladies," they would give him the cold shoulder. So what Butler decided to do is just say, you know what, these women are just rude. They can at least be nice and say, good day to you, things like that. But instead, they're just being mean. So Butler says, fine. If they're going to act like base and worldly women, according to General Order Number 28, they should be treated as though they are just women of ill repute out practicing their profession. So if you're going to insult us, we're going to insult you right back. And that seems to be Butler's technique. If you go and actually have a meeting with Benjamin Butler, he'll be snarky, he'll be sarcastic, he will let you know that he is in charge and that you don't count. Mary Boykin Chestnut of South Carolina said, "We hardly expected from Massachusetts behavior that would shame a Comanche." Well, you may not like the effrontery, but clearly Butler is in charge. More importantly, though, it is clear that the fall of New Orleans is going to have massive implications for the Confederacy. The British began to backpedal for any support that they might have for the Confederacy. But even more important, John Slidell, a Louisianan, who is in the court of Napoleon III and seeking French recognition for the Confederacy, has to break the bad news to the emperor. He says, yeah, New Orleans is gone. It is no longer a Confederate city. Napoleon III actually was doubly hurt. Not only was New Orleans gone, but his forces in Mexico had been defeated on the 5th of May, the Cinco de Mayo, by a Mexican army that they should have been able to run right over. So the French find their ambitions in Mexico thwarted at the same time that a hoped-for robust Confederacy standing up to cripple the American nation seems to be tottering towards disaster. In fact, the Confederacy really had only had two pieces of really good news. That was Jackson's campaign in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia and Robert E. Lee's campaigns near Richmond that actually pushed back the Union Army from the gates of Richmond. So the Confederacy may have avoided collapse, but it was still not particularly robust. So now you have the story enters a new phase. And this new phase is time to get out the maps and see exactly what we're looking at. It looked like we might be able to collapse the Confederacy all at once. It's not really cooperating with that script. They're doing some good in Virginia. We got to watch that. But now, how do we occupy Louisiana? We don't have a lot of troops to do it with, but at least we can kind of figure out what we're looking at. So when you roll out the maps of Louisiana, you notice that it's broken up into really three major zones. You've got the sugar parishes, which are essentially defined by the Mississippi in the east, and Bayou LaForce, which kind of forms a spine, and then the Gulf of Mexico. That area has already been somewhat occupied by Union troops, but only very tenuously. There's another region that goes up the west bank of the Mississippi, and another corridor that goes up Bayou Teche. In between these two is the Chaffalaya Basin. So you got a block here, and an extension here, and an extension here. Butler takes a look at the sugar parishes and says, hey, pretty easy. There's 2 points that if you occupy these 2 points, then you'll block any sort of Confederate moves back into this region. Occupy Donaldsonville in the east on the Mississippi River. Occupy Brashear City, which is the terminus of the railroad running from New Orleans to Brashear City, which was supposed to be the first transcontinental railroad that would have connected New Orleans with, say, San Francisco. But it had only gotten to Brashear City just a few miles down the tracks, but they did have to hack their way through the swamp. And so Butler takes a look at that and says, all right, we're going to go in there and we're going to figure out how to occupy this region. Clearly, Vicksburg isn't going to fall immediately, but we've got Baton Rouge, we've got New Orleans. We'll go in there and occupy the LaForce country. If you are a rich Louisianan, you now have some very serious issues facing you. How do you know what to do? Butler is clearly obnoxious to you. Yet, you got to do business with him. But if you do business with him and the Confederacy comes back, they rally, where are you going to be left? Because the Confederates will probably be looking at payback on you as well. So how do you protect what you have, your wealth, your property, your entire life's ambitions, caught between these two fires? And making their way the best they can will be a chore for Louisianans for the next few years as the Civil War plays out.